All right. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Go ahead and have a seat. Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us online, as we say all the time. If you find you a Bible-believing, teaching church, and if you can't do that, join us here. We will accept you with open arms, and we thank you for that very much. A little technical difficulty this morning. There's a lot of people on vacation and a lot of people out and about, and so we're trying to do several things at one time. And of course, the devil's been attacking a lot of us this week, not alone just today, but this morning, trying to stop this from happening. But thank you for Jesus. And that song we just played there at the end, even though you couldn't read a lot of the words, it's very few words that you have to read. And it's just simple. It says, just give me Jesus, right? And so that's one of the things in my life that I'm thankful for every single day, that I was able to find Jesus and have Jesus in my heart and Jesus in my life, because without that, I wouldn't have the family and the people that I have in my life every single day. And so with that being said, people that like sermon titles, my sermon title is called Watch Your Mouth, right? And my wife passed on this, we do Bible study on the app or whatever. My wife passed on this Bible study to me. It says, watch your mouth, right? And I started reading through it, and I was starting to say, babe, are you trying to tell me something? You're trying to say I'm saying too much when I'm not supposed to, you know? But when I started reading that Bible study about watch your mouth and going through it, then I started to realize, like, in our time in our life and some of the situations we're going through, it's actually pretty relevant. And so I was going through doing research and trying to figure out what I wanted to say today, and kept praying about it and what the Lord wanted me to say about it. And I always refer back to the Bible, right? I always, you can go out and read articles, you can go out and hear what other people say, and you can try to find your way that way. And I'm not saying it's completely wrong, but ultimately, our words come from our knowledge of Jesus, and what we are as Christians come from this word. And it's just a giant book of wisdom, right? We've always had those sayings from your parents or your mother-in-law or your grandparents or whatever. They tell you to do something, you're like, I got my way of doing it or whatever. And it's not just because they're older that they know what they're saying. It's also because they're wiser, right? They've been through life. They've been through the same things we have been through, maybe in one way or another. But they have a lot of wisdom, right? So a lot of times I would go to my grandparents, or I'd go to my mother-in-law, Sonia, and I would say things and talk to her about them and decisions in life. Hey, I'm about to do this, or hey, I really want to do this, or hey, we need to do this. And you go back and you're searching for those words of wisdom, right? And the Bible is just full of wisdom, right? Proverbs, Psalms, all those things kind of lead you in life. And you look at a lot of the motivational speakers and things out there, and they all got these motivational sayings and motivational things to do, right? And it's funny because you read them and you're like, oh man, that's pretty sweet. That person came up with that. But really, a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, you can go to the Bible and find the same thing, just the way Jesus said it, right? And you're like, oh, that's encouraging. And so over the years, I keep opening this more and more, right? At first I just opened it up. We was in church and the pastor would say a Bible verse and I'd go to it and I'd just read along or do whatever. But I never picked it up and I never really read it, right? I never really went through it chapter by chapter, book by book. And, now we have a lot of these newer versions of the Bible. They're a lot easier to read, right? Spoken word, you're able to pick it up, and there's not a lot of these and thous and thuses and doest and these, right? The is in the end, right? That's what I like to call it. And so it's a lot easier for someone to read. And you have the Bible app on your phone, right? You have the Bible app on your phone. I'm going to turn off my ringer now. But everybody I know that's in this room was the only people that would call me. But we have the Bible app, and you can read it on here, right? And we say, somebody took this, right? And they put it digitally, put it here so people can reach it, right? That was the intent, I'm sure, right? Or make it more convenient to pick up the word and read it, right? And so when we're going through this and you start reading this and you start to gain wisdom and knowledge and understanding, right? Not just about, God, but it's also about life. There's so many parables and stories and things that you can compare to, and you can say, hey, wait a minute. I could do the same thing in my life, right? I can apply those principles to my life, and my life's going to be better. And so me and my wife have been reading these books, and there's this doctor that's read these books, and he goes around and he speaks, does motivational speaking. He's a pastor, but he also plants churches and things like that. And he said that the Bible is a book of wisdom. It has secrets and principles for your life, right? And a lot of people don't know that. But he said the majority of the problems we have are related to the lack of wisdom, right? So he said we don't have marriage problems. We just got a lack of wisdom on marriage, right? Says we don't have financial problems. We just got a lack of wisdom on financial problems, on our finances, right? It says, but we also don't have a decision problem in our lives. We don't have the lack of ability to make the right decisions, but it's based on the fact that we don't have the wisdom to make those decisions. And a lot of times our mind just allows us to just make worldly decisions all the time because we haven't taken the time to read the book, right? That gives us that wisdom in the situations and the problems that we can be in. Like I said, as I've gotten older, when I was younger, I had a temper. I was wild and crazy. And I was one of those people, still am one of those people that I'll just say whatever I feel like I need to be said, right? Something happens, I'll just say it, right? Never been afraid to speak my mind. Never been afraid to talk either, right? And so, but for the last 30 years, I've had this little voice in my head that tells me, hey, wait a minute, Annette. Hey, wait a minute, my wife, right? Before that, and before I got close to Jesus, I didn't have those extra voices in my head, right? I had that lack of wisdom, right? I would just be speaking whatever I felt needed to be said at the moment, or say whatever I needed to say at that moment. And at the time when that was happening, I didn't realize the damage that I was doing, not only to me, right, myself and my reputation, but also to the other person involved, right? So all of us have a lot of problems and all of us have issues that we deal with, right? And sometimes what might be a big deal to me or a big deal to you is not a big deal to me, or it's not a big deal to you, right? But you could say the wrong thing to the wrong person and you could set that person back for years, right? You don't know what they're going through. You don't know their struggles. You don't know what they've been through, right? But you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, you could set that person back for years and you won't even know it. Or you might set them on a path of destruction, right? That you weren't aware of something that was going on in their lives. But because you thought, hey, I'm going to give my wisdom, not God's wisdom, you can just destroy that person, right? Or that group of people, or that church, right? How many times have we been in a church where people's mouths running in the background, right, destroy what's happening in the church and what it's meant to be, right? The church is here to help one another, be there for one another, encourage one another, lift each other up, right? But yet our worldly mind takes over sometimes and we start talking and doing things and we destroy what we've built, right? Now, I personally have been, ever since reading this Bible study, it's just added it to my mind. But I personally have tried to take the steps and the necessary reading to learn and gain wisdom on the things that come out of my mouth, right? Because when we talk about those things and we just say the words that we want to say, sometimes it's not meant for certain audiences, or maybe it's not meant for. There's a little kid behind you at a table at a restaurant and somebody says something. We've all been there, right? Or you have that one loudmouth that's saying things that he's not supposed to be saying, but yet there's children around, right? How hard have we worked as parents to try to protect our children from those type of people, right? Or how hard have we worked to protect those children? Sometimes we're those people, right? And it's okay if mommy and daddy say it, but if a stranger says it, then, it's completely wrong, right? And so, and I would be the first to admit in my past that, I was in the military, I was in the Army, and there's some people in this room that was in the military and they understand, like, cuss words were part of the language, right? Cursing was part of your language. You had to use a curse word for someone to understand what you were asking for, right? And so when Austin was first born, my firstborn son was first born, and I was in the military, I was young, he was younger, and I would curse all the time, and I'd catch myself cursing, and Nat would say, quit cursing, or Sonia would say, hey, quit cursing. And it wasn't because they weren't offended. It was because they knew that my mouth was going to teach my younger son my mouth, right? And so I had to learn to stop saying those things, right, in front of my children. But I think about that, and it was like, oh, I'm protecting my children. But at the same time, those words coming out of my mouth, As Proverbs 21, verse 23 says, those who guard their mouths and their tongues keep themselves from calamity, right? So it's not about protecting. Obviously, you want to protect your children and you want to protect yourself and you want to protect your family, but sometimes those words coming out of your mouth are going to cause all kinds of trouble, right? And in my life, my words have caused me. I've had a lot of times where it was funny and I'm life of the party, and you're going to say things that you're supposed to say and do things and make everybody laugh, but then you didn't realize maybe something you said could have hurt somebody's feelings, or something that you said, maybe someone took it as you were saying something to them, right? And so my dad used to have this saying. He's like, you watch your mouth because you're writing checks that you can't cash, and there's some other words that are involved in that. But I will say that that's something a lot of people don't think about, right? Like, you're saying things to people that you have no right to say, right? But you're also saying things to yourself, maybe your spouse. One of the things that I hear a lot of times is somebody is physically abused, right? The term used, physically abused, like they're getting beat up or somebody's tormenting somebody or whatever, and bullying, right? But a lot of people don't think about being verbally abused, right? In schools and children, they've become mean to one another, right? But then you get the power of this phone right here, and then they have all these social media websites, and people can say whatever they want, right? I can say anything I want to anybody without any repercussions, because I can disguise myself as somebody else, and I can call you whatever I want. I can say whatever I want to you with no repercussions. Now, as a kid on the playground, and you said something to somebody without social media, then there ended up being a fight a lot of times, right? You got popped in the mouth, or you popped somebody in the mouth or whatever, and it's because you were held accountable right then and there. And these words in this Bible are to hold us accountable, right? And we learn that wisdom to say, hey, even though I'm online, maybe I'm still going to be held accountable. I'm going to be held accountable from God, right? I'm not just going to be held accountable to the person I said something to. I'm going to be held accountable from God, from the words that come out of my mouth, right? And I'm up here now, and I'm speaking to you guys about the words coming out of my mouth, and there's words coming out of my mouth. And before I came up here, I prayed to God that I didn't say something that I'm not supposed to say, right? And that he gives me the wisdom to give me the words to be able to say the things I need to say to you this morning for the message that we all need to hear, right? And there's a lot of things that we can get from the Bible that provide wisdom. And after that Bible study, I decided, hey, let me see how many verses are in the Bible that say something about watching your mouth, right? And there are many, okay? There are many. James chapter 3 says, verse 5 and 6, it said, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes a great boast. Consider a large, great forest fire, right? Big, giant forest fire. We all know that here in Columbus very well with the Canadian forest fires. We've had this great, awesome haze in our atmosphere for the last couple of weeks, right? But that one fire was set by one tiny little spark, right? And so that one tiny little spark kind of resembles how powerful our words can be sometimes. When I was talking about a few minutes ago how you could say something mean to somebody, and then all of a sudden you've set them back for years mentally, right? And so words have a lot of power, right? Words can lift you up. They encourage you, right? Can win you an election, right? We could say all kinds of things, right? But what's our intent behind those words? That's the thing that we have to remember. What is your intent behind the words that you're putting out here? Like my intent right now is to encourage you and lift you up and help you gain wisdom, as I've gained wisdom in the past week, reading about the words that are coming out of my mouth. But a lot of times people don't take the time to think that words also have the power to tear down, right? They have the ability to tear you down, right? They have the ability to destroy relationships, marriages, friendships, families, right? All because we want to say something because we think that that's what we're supposed to say at the time. That we didn't take the time and gain wisdom before we speak those words. Take a moment to pause for a second. And that's what my wife tells me all the time. Just pause, just wait. Don't reply, right? Because a lot of times we get texts and things from family members or our kids and all those kind of things. And the thing is like right now I'm up here, I'm talking, I'm loud, I'm talking to you. You can see my facial expressions. You can see, hey, was that a joke or was that not a joke? Or was that being serious or was he trying to be serious or whatever? But if I get a text from somebody and they say something to me and I'm like, I don't like how they said that. Well, how do I know how they said that? Right? I try to read into the tone of the text or this is what they really meant, right? And because that's pretty evil, right? So you want to have a conversation on this thing, but you really can't have a true conversation unless, like, my wife and I can probably have a good conversation, but still you're missing that eye contact. You're still missing the verbal cues or me rolling my eyes or me doing whatever or whoever doing whatever, right? And during COVID, I was substitute teaching in middle school, right? I don't hear very well, but I can read lips. Well, during COVID, all the kids had masks on, right? So I'm trying to have conversations with these kids and try to get my point through, right? But the masks are covering everything up, right? So I'm missing some of the verbal cues or the facial cues from these children. And so sometimes you can have a conversation with them and you understand, oh, they're understanding, right? They're nodding their head. Oh, yes, reply back, whatever. But with these masks, I couldn't tell. Sometimes they were mad. Sometimes they were happy. Sometimes they just didn't care. Right? They would just mentally check out because they were hiding behind the mask, right? And that's the same way when people hide behind their phones in the text and the things that they say online on social media. They're behind this phone and you can't see them. You can't see how they're reacting, right? And I can't see you if everyone's got their mask on and a lot of the kids wear hoodies, right? And so you wouldn't be allowed to walk into a bank that way. Right? You go to a bank and you see on the door, it says, take your sunglasses off, take your hat off, whatever, because they need to be able to identify you, right? And it's the same way, it was the same way in the classroom. I wanted to get closer to the kids. I wanted to get to know them, right? I wanted them to trust me, right? And let them know that I have the knowledge that you need in order to teach this class, even though it's just a substitute for the week, or in some cases it was longer than that. And it took time to develop those relationships, but with the mask, it took longer, right? It took longer. It put something in the way that stopped the normal communication between people. And I feel like a lot of times when we say things and we're doing things, majority of us, we're not doing it with the intent to hurt somebody. We're not doing it with the intent to tear people down. And we're not doing it with the intent to destroy anything. We're doing it because we love you, or we're doing it because we're doing it out of care, right? Like, I want to help that person. They're in need. They need encouragement. And they need help. They need me, just with somebody on the side of the road and helping people, or somebody in need, or homeless person. A lot of times they just want to talk to somebody, right? When Annette and I would go to the shelters and just have conversations with people. We'd feed them, through the food line, but then we'd go, everyone would go out in the little cafeteria area and then we'd get to sit down with them and just talk with them. We'd have communication, be able to talk with them and understand why are they here? What happened? Right? And a lot of times you would hear them say things and it was like, oh, I remember when I was young and I would do something stupid like that. Or I remember I was young and I didn't listen to so-and-so. And you think, I could have easily been here, right? Because if I didn't have the wisdom that I have from this word, you could easily end up where they're at, making the wrong decisions and drinking too much or partying too much or lying and fighting all the time. And then you lose your family, lose your job, all those things. I'm not trying to create this doomsday scenario, but it's because a lot of times when I use the term wisdom and watching your mouth, but it's also a lot of times you just got to listen, right? We watch our mouths, do all those things, but if we don't listen, or in this case, read, right, and understand, and then put it in our brain, then we're in just as much trouble, right? I have tons of books at home where it's like, a bunch of books I have, it's like self-help and, how to get rich in a million days, or $1 million in 100 days, just all these different kind of motivational books, all these different things from all these Christian authors. There's some authors out there that are of the world and different things like that. And I have all these books and do all this reading or whatever. And this was years ago. And I said, I've never read this book all the way through. There's some books I got at the house I've read twice. Oh, I need to go back and remember that little thing in life. And then I started comparing a lot of those things that are in those books, and it's right here. It's right here. But when people look at this book, and I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's pretty daunting, right? Looks like a textbook, you know. And there's so many plans out there and so many ways to read this thing and study this thing and interpret this thing. And I'm not calling it a thing and bringing it down to less than what it is, because it's the Word of God, right? Right now I'm calling it this thing, but it's the Word of God, right? Last week I had this post I put on the house Facebook page. You know, last couple of weeks I started a new job. We've been really busy or whatever. And my Bible was sitting there. And then over the week, I've kind of just started piling things on top of it. And you forget about it. I hadn't opened it up in a couple of weeks. And it even had a little dust on it, right? And I was like, okay, I got to check myself, right? So I took all that stuff that was on top of my Bible and I set it over here and created a whole nother pile, which is a whole nother question, another thing for another day. But I did get out. I had these little wipes at the house, and I got out the wipes and I cleaned off my Bible, and I made that post because it wasn't just for the church, but it was also for me, right? To say, hey, if this thing's got dust on it and it's dirty and there's other books on top of it, you know, put this book back on top, make it a priority, right? Because everything we need to know is right here. All the words that we want to come out of our mouth to help people is right here. And when we speak thoughtfully, when we speak considerately, right? Sometimes people listen a little better, right? And sometimes people listen to people that speak their language. You know what I mean? And so a lot of times when I'm in a situation, I've always been pretty good with I can be friends with just about anybody. And it's not a person I can't walk up on the streets and talk to. And my wife thinks it's funny because we'll go somewhere like out of town, out of state, and I'll run into people that I know, right? And then if I don't know them, I will know them by the time we leave, right? And a lot of that is just, I truly believe, is a God-given ability, right? Not everybody has that ability or courage or the ability to talk to somebody. And so when I was thinking about that the other day, I was thinking about the ability to talk to people and how great that is. And then I was thinking, well, there's some people that just can't talk to people. But then there's that one particular person, and a lot of you probably know this person. They don't say much, right? They really don't talk a whole lot. But when they do, it's very profound, right? It's very profound and maybe makes a huge impact on people in their lives. Some of us, it might have been our grandfather or our own fathers, right? Sometimes they'll just say something. They'll just sit back and they wait. And then they say one thing and just changes the whole dynamics of the room or the whole dynamics of the conversation. And I was saying, I may have the ability to go out and talk to all these people and say all these things, but what I'm saying, is it dynamic? Is it what's needed, right? Is it profound? Is it going to help that person, right? Before, I'd just spew off at the mouth and say whatever I felt like I needed to say, right? Especially in traffic. We all like to say things in traffic when nobody else is around, right? We're going down the highway at 75 miles an hour. A lot of us use sign language when we're driving down the highway, right? It's another form of language that we have that people love to use, right, during road rage incidents. And my wife used to say all the time to me, because I would get mad, I would get cut off at the gas station, or someone would cut over from me in traffic, and of course I'm going to run this person down, I'm going to catch them, and I'm going to give them peace of my mind, right? And she would say, Zach, there's kids in the car. Zach, your children are in the back seat, right? So not am I going to go speeding, then I'm going to go up there and I'm going to start an altercation with this person, but then who knows what they're going to do, right? Again, will I be able to cash that check, right? Will I be able to defend myself? Will I be able to do the things I need to do? And a lot of people hope that you are, and you talk about those things, but what are you doing when you're doing that, right? And then I've seen people flip people the bird and cuss somebody out and then drive past, and on the back is their church sticker where they attend, right there, right? Everybody at this church will say there's a house sticker. We don't have house bumper stickers, but we have house bumper stickers. Some of us would be guilty of that, right? The house bumper, they go to the house. That must be a real liberal church, right? Our pastor has been accused of cussing on the pulpit, so... but if we truly watch our mouths, we must cultivate the virtue of self-control. right? Proverbs 13:3 reminds us that those who guard their lips preserve their lives, but those who speak rashly will come to ruin. It is through self-control that we can pause before speaking, weighing our words and considering their potential impact. Let us resist the urge to speak impulsively. Responding with anger or frustration lets us resist that urge to respond with anger or frustration. Instead, let us choose patience, kindness, and empathy, right? And here's the thing. I'm going to admit this publicly. My wife and I were helping somebody yesterday in need, and we're helping clean out their house, and it's a friend of mine's parents. And there was a yearbook in this box. We're going through, they're laughing at our pictures and so on and so forth, reading the messages from the girls and the guys and what people said and the teachers say about you and all these different things. But then there's this particular person, I'm not going to say their name, but there was a particular person, and we had circled it and made a comment about this person. Back then, we thought it was funny. Back then, it was the thing to do, right? That was your Facebook, right? You had to, you guys have seen that commercial where the bunch of older ladies are sitting around in the living room and they're tearing pictures off the wall and say, I unfriend you. And they're saying that's not how that works, right? But that's what we did back then. We were able to write in your personal yearbook that you took home and you wrote around I heart forever or best friends or whatever derogatory name that this person was or whatever derogatory name that person was. But you close that book and that's your book, that's your yearbook, and it sits in those boxes for years. And then you start going through them. And then here it is. Your kids pick up that book and they start going through mommy and daddy's yearbook, right? Oh, look, you love so-and-so. Who was this person? Ha, 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 right? That's funny. But then they see that, oh, you crossed out this person and called them a name. Or you crossed out or you made a funny derogatory mark, which you thought was funny at the time, to that person in their yearbook. But here's your kids going through that book and they see the things that you wrote. And it's kind of like, that stings a little bit, doesn't it? Because your kids just saw something that we wrote and we thought was funny at the time. And yeah, we were in middle school and we were being dumb or whatever. But it's still, my point is we weren't held accountable because we did that. We closed that book and it went in that box and then went into storage for years. And you thought, no one's ever going to see that. No one's ever going to come back and read that I wrote this derogatory mark about this person in this yearbook. And then the kids find the yearbooks and they're going through, this is 30 years later, 40 years later, and they find this book and they're like, who's this person, Dad? Who's this person? Why did you say this about this person? So now I'm going to be held accountable for the words I said 30 or 40 years ago. And it's the same way that we're going to be held accountable now because our words are online forever. This video is going out into the middle of nowhere, and somebody's going to be able to hold me accountable for the words that I'm preaching to you right now and said, hey, Zach, you just said this, but 2 weeks ago you were preaching online and you said those who guard their mouths and their tongues keep themselves from calamity. And so yesterday, when that happened, I thought about this sermon that I was preparing to speak to you guys, and I said, there's accountability. As followers of Christ, we are called to be mindful to our words and impact they carry. And as we carry those words and those impacts, and they continue to carry on. Like I was telling you about the yearbook photo, that had no impact on anybody but us in that room that night when we were in 7th grade and we got our yearbooks and we started making comments and having people sign our books and do those kind of things. There was no impact at that time, right? 40 years later, now there's impact because 2 children was reading through Daddy's yearbook and they said, oh, crap, what is this? Right? And then you got to be accountable for that and say, hey, that's not what you do. We were wrong at the time, and we probably shouldn't do that. But let our speech be seasoned with grace and seasoned with truth. Let our speech be seasoned with grace and be seasoned with truth. May our words be a source of healing, comfort, and hope that reflect the love of Christ to a world in desperate need. And when I wrote that last night, or was working on that this week and then wrote that last night, and I said, how relevant is it to today the other day, I was sitting there with my dad after work, and we were just sitting there chatting. We're flipping through the TV, and we are polar opposites when it comes to political beliefs and things like that. So we try not to talk about that. That's not part of our conversation, because we know one person's going to say something that the other person's not going to like, or they're going to say something that I'm not going to like, and then it ends up in this big heated argument, right? And you're not going to change each other's minds, right? But when we look at this political forecast in our world, and we look at the news that we're watching every single day, it's like this morning when I turned on the news, it was all about the shooting that was here in Columbus, and they found the last person, they got him in Chicago, all these things, and then went to the next shooting, and then the next shooting, and then the next shooting, and the next shooting. And I was like, man, why am I making myself susceptible to those words coming through that screen this morning right before I go to church, and how all that negativity weighed me down? Because it took like 10 stories before they got to a cute little story about a puppy that was rescued or whatever, right? Why not start with that story, right? Why not start with the cute little puppy story? You know, I read something a couple years ago. It was talking about like the first 30 minutes of your day, what happens in that first 30 minutes can control the rest of your day. That's how your mindset is going to be the rest of the day. So if you wake up to a bunch of negative news, stories, crying, dog threw up in the bedroom in the middle of the night, right? The rest of your day is going to go that way, right? That's what the scientific studies say. And so I try to make it a point that the first things that I hear or see in the morning is positive. The Word of God, right? Maybe a Bible study. Maybe my mind went just blank. Daily devotional. Thank you. Maybe a daily devotional, right? Start your day off right. Because a lot of times the first thing we do is we go, oh yeah, so-and-so. Oh, look what they did this weekend. Look what I did this weekend. Look what they did. Oh, look what they ate. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Look at that, right? And it might be funny or whatever, right? But you're consuming your mind with the world before you go out into the world. And last week, Corey preached on something, and it kind of hit hard with me, and that was, we're not supposed to be the same. We're supposed to stand out and be different when we're outside these walls, right? That's part of being a Christian, right? People will know who you are by the words coming out of your mouth. People will know who you are by the actions and the deeds that you do every single day. I don't need to say anything. I don't need to go out and boast, hey, I'm helping the homeless, I'm feeding so-and-so, I'm cleaning so-and-so's yard. No, you're just going to go do those things. And then you're going to go home and you do other things, right? Without boasting, right? Without sharing to the world, look at me, look what we did today, right? And so when I when I say that our words need to be a source of healing and comfort and hope, and reflect that the love of Christ to the world is important, it's really desperate. The world's really desperate now for a good message, good news, good things, right? And it's all right here, right? I mean, there's a lot of crazy stories in the Bible. Like when I was younger and I was reading them, like, what? Dude got swallowed by a whale? What? That didn't happen. These dudes were thrown in the fire and they came back out and they didn't even smell like smoke. What? Right? These are crazy stories. I have the Bible app, and I thought it was funny because I love watching movies, right? And so you can change the voice of the person reading. You can have the Bible be read to you, right? And you can change the voice. And so I listened to the version of the Bible where James Earl Jones reads the Bible. And everybody knows James Earl Jones's voice and just how dynamic it is and wonderful it is, right? Lion King, you guys know Lion King, that's James Earl Jones, right? And so I think about those, how that's read to you, and it's just like, oh, this is great, it's theatrical, it's wonderful, right? And then you look like a Passion of Christ, right? That's insane how they did that. But this past week, and this has been on my mind, and I feel like I need to say something. This past week, we went to this movie. It was limited release. Jim Caviezel, the same guy he played Christ in Passion of Christ. It's called The Sound of Freedom. What it is about this Department of Homeland Security guy was in the government, and he was trying to rescue people that have been enslaved in sexual slavery, but they never really rescued anybody. But what they did was they would find these people and then hand it over to another group of people, and then they would take care of it. Or they'd hand it over to that country's government, and then they would take care of it, right? And his partner, part of the thing that they had to do, they had to watch these videos of these children. It was pretty, they don't show you in the movie, but you see them watching the videos of these children being in captive in slavery. And the one guy says, I just can't take this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I'm out. I'm done, right? And he has to walk away. He cannot take it anymore because he can't see another child end up in slavery. And he knows what he was doing was a good fight, right? And this guy quits his job, does everything he needs to do, and he does the fight without the help of the government. Because he had found this little boy, and this little boy said, can you help me find my sister? And this is a true story, right? Not like a true story, or, hey, we made a movie around this to make it more theatrical, but we added some parts to the story. No, it's 100% true. So he made it his mission to find this little girl because he found the boy, and the little boy's like, can you find my sister? And so this guy gives up his career in the government, leaves his family for 9 months on end, right? And his wife said, go do what you got to do. They had 5 kids at home, right? She said, go do what you got to do. Bring that little girl home. I thought, man, that's wow, right? But the movie was called The Sound of Freedom. And I was like, never really understood that. And I was talking about my voice this morning and speaking and doing all those things. And I thought about the sound of freedom, right? And because not a spoiler alert or whatever, but there are some kids that they rescue, and they're all just sitting there waiting for boats to take them home, airplanes to take them home, feed them, whatever. And they're sitting there, and they just start singing, right? They just start singing, and they start drumming, right? They start drumming. And one of the people looks at the other people and says, that's the sound of freedom, right? Because they're so excited, they know they're no longer going back to where they just came from, but yet they're singing and they're rejoicing and they're drumming, right? And we had all these issues this morning, and I picked these songs intentionally this morning because one, by request, because it was one of my wife's favorite, but All We Need Is Jesus was up there, and it was kind of blocked out by our house community emblem there. But it was important to me with the worship this morning, and we talk about watching our mouths and the things that we do. If we just paused every day and just sang some worship, right? Just sang a song in the morning when you get in your car, right? Don't listen to the news. Don't listen to wherever, right? Just get in your car and put on the worship, or get in your office and put on the worship. In the shower, put on the worship. Wherever you're at, put on the worship. When you're out back grilling, put on the worship, right? Because those are the words that I want coming out of my mouth, right? Those are the words that I want people to know about me and my beliefs, and then what can be done in the world. And so when I was thinking about that sound of freedom, and I was like, how free is it to be able to just sing whenever we want to sing? I can't sing worth a lick. That's why I kind of went back that way to sing, so you guys wouldn't hear me this morning and run out the doors. But I want us to commit to ourselves to watch our mouths diligently, guarding our tongue and using our words wisely. May our speech be characterized by kindness, humility, and edification. And we do so, we honor God. When we do that, we're honoring God, right? Build healthy relationships and contribute to the flourishing of communities. May the Lord empower us to watch our mouths and bring glory to his name, right? That's what this whole thing was about. Me talking about watching mouths and going into the scriptures and doing all those things is about bringing glory to God with our mouths, whether it's through worship, whether it's through bringing somebody to Christ, whether it's just helping a friend or doing the things that we do. And if our intent is to bring glory to God, right, it's probably going to go okay. Now, I'm not going to say 100% of the time you're trying, right, but at least you're trying. Right? We're trying to spread the good news. We're trying to be good people, and we're trying to watch our mouths. And so with that, I just ask that you guard your mouths, guard your hearts, right? But say the things when they need to be said and do the things when they need to be done. But also to remember the sound of freedom and what it's like to be able to speak the words and say the things that you want to say, but make it the right things. Thank you. So I'm going to close this in prayer this morning. And I just want to thank you, Heavenly Father, for my ability to be up here and to worship you with the words of my mouth and to be able to spread your word and to be able to share your word and to be able to teach your word. Lord, I just ask for everybody in this room and in line that you just provide us the wisdom that we need. Provide us with the words that we need in the situations when we're out on the streets or we are in conflict or we are with other people, that you give us the wisdom and the words that we need to say. Lord, I just thank you for this wonderful day. I thank you for everything that we have, and I pray for this house, and I pray for Pastor Dave and Pastor Corey and all the people that are out traveling this week and the last couple of weekends. Lord, just guide their hearts and guide their minds and protect their families. And we just love you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Now, we got to do a little bit of the church business here. We when we do tithes and offerings, we have a basket in the back, and if you just want to drop something in the back, or we also have online giving. Our online giving is text the number, and then when you text online, you text to that number, and then you text them out, and another link will come up, and that link then you can sign up, and you could do, and it's easier to give that way, and you can just set it and forget it, whatever you want to do. But also, there's envelopes in the back, and you can put envelopes over there, and we just thank you very much. And everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you.